Hi, I'm Naeem Davis. I'm an artist, curator, producer who cut their teeth essentially putting on club nights for queer, trans, and non-binary people in the UK. I've been doing that for about 5 years now. And I just wanted to welcome you to the sorry. Maybe
Yeah, you gotta say all that.
no, you ain't got to say all that. I've got to say all that.
I'm not. I don't gotta say none of that. I can say my name is Bambii, right?
You say your name's Bambi. I'll ask you to introduce yourself to some degree, just like what do you do?
Okay, because I can't manage all that.
Welcome to the third episode of Foresight, a new weekly program brought to life by Foreigner in partnership with Ray and Nephew. And today we have the pleasure, I have the pleasure, of talking to me, my work wife, the bane of my existence, Bambi. What am I
Ray of
doing?
light. What's up? How are you?
I'm
Well,
blessed.
fun.
How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm just, it's so cold. I'm back in Toronto. I'm like, how do y'all deal with this? It is so cold. This is like, I think really this is my last like winter here. I realize I can't do another winter here.
How long were you in
Yeah,
Jamaica?
6 months.
Jeez.
I was there for 6 months. So I'm just like, I'm back here and I'm like, ooh, ghetto. I'm like, my lip is dry. I'm like, this is like this is crazy. The earth is trying to kill us during this time. This is population control. Winter is population control.
So for the audience that are watching, you don't know who you are, what you do. Give us a
So my name is Bambi. I am a DJ and producer based in Toronto. I spent the last chunk of the last 7 years throwing a party called Jerk, which is this, Caribbean centered event that prioritizes women, queer and trans folk, but is open to allies. And, it's just about sort of like centering the history of Caribbean music in Toronto and expanding outward to other iterations of dance music. When I was a kid coming up and going clubbing in Toronto, the dance spaces were like really stratified in Toronto. So if I wanted to hear like techno and house, I would automatically end up in a white space where I felt uncomfortable. And if I wanted to hear dancehall, I'd end up in like an uncle's basement where I also felt uncomfortable. And, I started Jerk because, to break some social rules and to like actually like I guess it was a type of like social acupuncture. It's a type of like provocation. I think Toronto's like so diverse, but in the ways that people actually like organize here, you see the
different.
boundaries between communities. So Jurek is very much pushing back against that as much as possible. So
Yeah, I had the same issue here in London. Like growing
yeah,
up, if I wanted to hear Bashment, again, Uncle's Basement, I need to divide up myself, compartmentalize.
you need to compartmentalize yourself. Yeah.
Like there were, I'd say like lesbian and gay nights that were just Bashment heavy in South
Mhm.
London. Like Vauxhall was notorious for like black gay club nights in general, but I felt like there was a real um, the only thing I couldn't bring there of myself was like my gender and being
Mhm.
trans or being. It was very classist as well. There were like systems and ways of being in
Yeah.
this
one
places.
hundred percent.
Um, but yeah, I started Babes because I wanted to bring all of myself and not feel any type of way where I was. So
Exactly.
Jerk is doing what it's doing.
Yeah.
You were in Jamaica. Did you ever think about bringing Jerk there?
Doing so I have thought about it in Jamaica. I was there for a long time and it's probably even more complicated than I initially thought before going there. I think I've I'm Jamaican, I'm proudly Jamaican. I've read Caribbean literature, I've grown up in a Caribbean household, and there's just things about being Caribbean that are unique to being to like holding that identity. And I think when I went there, I was like, oh no, I was like, y'all are crazy. It's just much more socially complex. So in terms of bringing an event there like Jerk that sort of has opposing identities, because you know what I mean, a lot of queer Caribbean kids go to Jerk. It's a space for that. I don't think I figured out how that would work in Jamaica. That being said, there are queer organizers in Jamaica throwing parties. There's a an iteration of Pride there. Obviously, it's small, you know what I mean. But there is, I wouldn't say there's no organ. I would, that would be not honoring kind of the strength that people have there. Like there's organizing happening there. I don't think I figured out how to retranslate jerk in a space there because it would need to be fixed. You know what I mean? Like I was there for 6 months, but it's just like where you're doing it, like who you're collaborating with, local, regional leaders. You know what I mean? Because it's not just about like where it's like you need permit, you know what I mean? When you're in people's spaces, you need like permission, and it's not from the fucking government. It's like that man there who always says there needs to allow the thing. Like you feel me?
No, I feel you. Like permissions, whenever we're stepping into a place that we're not necessarily like from, we weren't born there. Yeah, there's ways of stepping into that. It's met with care, I guess.
Yeah. Can you turn up a little bit? I'm having a little bit of trouble. Or maybe I need to turn up my thing. Hold on. Oh, no.
I said earlier that my mic was a little bit low. I don't know what it is. I did just get a new laptop screen thingy. I think it was a bit bug. So
Okay.
I'll just project.
Okay, not hard for you.
You mentioned something about permissions. Like, how did you find the permission to start Jerk? Like, I know obviously you had your origins as a DJ. Actually, I actually don't even know your origin story, like the Bambii origin story. Like,
starting Jerk. Starting Jerk. Okay. When I had finally got to university, like I went to a bunch of different, I was like bad. So like I dropped out of high school, went back to high school, went to a bunch of different high schools, then was like, I want to go to university. That became like a crystallized idea in my head. I was like, I want to go to university. And now when I reflect back on that, I didn't want to go to university, but it was just, there's so few pathways for young people. I was like, okay, no, I need this accolade because I need to feel like I'm doing something and attach myself to an identity, because it started to feel very strange being like 20 and not being in school and being surrounded by students. Like I needed to attach myself to an institution. So I went to university, got there, and I was like, oh, this is garbage. I hated it. I loved what I was studying, but I don't think that sort of like space and infrastructure would have been a good it wasn't a good learning environment for me. I feel like, post-secondary, I don't know how it is in the UK, but it's like highly corporatized in North America. And it kind of felt like being in a big school mall, kind of, you know what I mean? Like I didn't actually feel like I was learning. Left university, and then I probably worked 97,000 different jobs after that. Like I was just like, would work anywhere. I'd work at call centers, restaurants, sometimes, anywhere. And then sometimes I sort of did jobs. I do have an interest in working with youth and doing community organizing. So sometimes I would get a good job. And so I do have some background in that, but I also didn't have, I didn't have a degree. So it wasn't, those jobs weren't consistent. But when I did those jobs, I was like, oh, I understood that I liked curation. I understood that I liked connecting communities. But I still didn't understand what I wanted to do. The DJing thing came from, we organized this is the first event I ever organized, and it was called Recess. And it was basically a block party outside that was centered around double dutch. So we bought all these skipping ropes, and in the summer we invited people to double dutch, and then we had a DJ.
Can you double dutch? Yo, I don't do that here, so I'm just asking.
No, I can. It takes me a little bit. It's 2 ropes. It takes me a little bit. I was like, slow down. Let's start slow. No, it takes me a little bit. Yes, I can. But we started it with that, and then that sort of got into we need a DJ. And then that sort of opened me up to being like, I don't like any of these DJs. I don't like any of them at all, right? And I guess really haphazardly, I started playing the music. I can't remember how I played the music. It could have even been off a phone, but I was getting really serious. I'm like, no, we need to hear this song next, and then you know what I mean. And then one night we had an after party for it. I think I DJ'd the after party, didn't even understand what DJing was then. And then very shortly after that, I came up with jerk. I was like, I'm going to do a party. I'm going to bake a bunch of jerk chicken because that's where it started. I made enough jerk chicken for 200 people. So I don't know if anybody knows that, but every jerk we give away chicken. And I used to cook that bumbleclot chicken myself. Like, and so I made the jerk chicken myself. And then there was this like illegal space that's closed now that let me do it. And I remember it being like 11 p.m. and no one was there. And I was like, damn, I quit. I was like, this is not for me. I was like, where is everybody? What the fuck is y'all late?
You were cooking and DJing.
Yeah, I cooked it, started DJing. And then by 12, maybe it just hit capacity. It was like shoulder to shoulder full. And I DJ'd it, let's say. It probably was terrible. But I also just remember when I was DJing it, I was like, probably had never gotten that feeling in school or at any of the jobs that I played or at anything. I've never had that feeling, and it just felt so right. I was gonna sound so corny, and then I like sounds so corny, but I really felt like I was just like found something that I actually genuinely liked, and I wasn't reacting to like my parents or to like some societal capitalist gaze. I actually just truly liked it. I really, really liked it. And then I just never stopped after that. I went very hard. I was playing a lot of like house stuff that I liked and playing a lot of dancehall. I was playing probably terribly, but I also just think for that time in Toronto, like that was like 7 years ago now. So I think for that time in Toronto, you know, Toronto is very ethnically diverse, but there was definitely, you know, disconnects between the communities. So I think for that time, a Black girl, like alt, whatever white people were the words white people like to use. I don't like to use those words, but like being in that DIY space, playing, you know what I mean, Beanie Man, and for sure, like say a Luna George at that time or whatever the fuck I was playing, you know what I mean? People were like, oh my God, like losing their mind, and the party kind of took off. And then as it took off, it, you know, I also became a student. I also learned so much more about music, because at that point it's like I wouldn't say I was like a music head. I would say I liked music and didn't even know how much I liked music. So DJing also taught me a lot about who I was and the things I cared about, and, you know, made me like research it much more than I would have if I hadn't, you know. Yeah.
So like you brought your intersections to the dance.
Yeah.
It kind of like, I guess like the policy kind of followed afterwards about like.
Yeah. Because I don't think I even like, I think when I was like that young, I don't even think I like conceptualized it so explicitly in my head, but like, I just think because before that party, I love partying. So I was always at the club already. So that wasn't hard to get you know what I mean? Like I was in the club before I started teaching. You know, that's like, it's like church for me. You know what I mean? Like without fail. Like there's this other party I used to go to called Yes Y'all, which is one of the biggest, longest standing queer parties in Toronto. And I would go there all the time. And I'd be in a lot of different nightlife spaces. So I think when I started Jerk, I don't think I had some like explicit sort of, I knew that I needed to hear this music in the same space, but I also didn't understand the impact of like my own intersectional identity and how that would influence the space. And then that's something I probably conceptualized later. But in retrospect, yeah, I had a bunch of queer Caribbean friends. I had a bunch of straight friends. I have, you know, white friends by default in Toronto. Like, you know what I mean? And by default, just through being in all of these different spaces, I had lived all over Toronto. That just, you know, I was lucky in that way. I don't think I had to like say what it was. It became it in a very like sincere kind of organic way. You know what I mean? I haven't had to really like police Jerk. Throwing parties has taught me a lot. I don't think that I probably would have had the same, you know, politics around space and people and blah, blah, if I didn't have that like experience of curating that space, because it's not really just about nightlife and music. It's a microcosm for how we look at bodies and value and joy and art and who can be exposed to what. And so yeah,
I can't wait to go to a jerk. I can't believe that.
you need to. You might lose your wallet.
Europe then, isn't it?
Huh?
You still one in Europe then, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm trying, baby. I'm sorry. Sorry to hear it.
So you recently had the privilege and the smarts to spend lockdown in Jamaica, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine it was a bit of a homegoing for you, spending that much time there. Like, what did you learn about the space, and like, how has it informed who you are as a DJ and a producer now?
Going back and referencing Jerk and referencing Toronto, I don't think many people know this, actually, if you're not in Toronto, but Toronto actually has a very similar ethnic breakdown as somewhere like London. So a lot of Caribbean people, specifically Jamaican people, immigrated here in the late 70s and the 80s and onwards. So there's actually a very significant Jamaican population here. And that's influenced everything from the language, the music that people make, just it's really characterized the city. I don't think Toronto would be Toronto without that influx of Caribbean immigrants. So when I look at club nights, you're hearing dancehall everywhere. Dancehall is a automatic party starting. It's automatic. It's the conduit for dance. You know what I mean? As soon as you hear that, it's nostalgic. People's bodies are moving. There's something very like instinctual and primal about dancehall production, the way that it's made, that you're gonna do like you just gotta start. That's it. And that is very that's, people will say a lot of different things, but that's the damn truth. Right, about Toronto. However, I also think there's this way that like I don't think that Caribbean culture has sort of been archived properly in Toronto and acknowledged. Like, it's very interesting. It's something that's so influential, but then when we see formalized narratives of the city, it's rarely mentioned. When I like compare it to something like the UK, I'm sure it's not perfect, but there's just ways that like, big media platforms like a BBC, blah, 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 make sure to like hold space for that kind of cultural influence, where it's like something like our CBC, you never hear anything about, the huge influence of like Caribbean culture here. So as a DJ, I was always playing dancehall here, but I also realized when I went to Jamaica, I was looking at dancehall as a DJ and a producer through a super like nostalgic lens. Like when I got there, I was like, oh, y'all, I was like, who? I was like hearing all this new music, like running around with my phone, like Diplo Shazamming it. I was like, oh my, I was like, whoa, like what skill, what? Like, I realized that I was very behind. I was actually really behind, not just me, a bunch of Toronto DJs. Like, I think if you're not in ends, because I'm like in downtown Toronto, that's like, okay, hipster alt. I'm not like on the strip I grew up. I feel like if I like was back in the hood I grew up in, I'd probably keep up with things, right? Back to the idea of Toronto being very stratified. But just as like a downtown kid, it's like, there's just not, people are not up to the music. Probably takes 6 months from new music from Jamaica to reach Toronto, if not longer. So I think it was very humbling when I got there to realize, okay, there's new up and coming artists here. There's new styles of production. There's new slang. There's new aesthetics that we are not aware of in Toronto. And that when we try to retranslate Caribbean culture, it's just outdated. It's irrelevant now, the ways that we try to retranslate it, and almost condescending, you know what I mean? And I think that if you like music and you consider yourself a curator, it's kind of your job to, keep up. And we need to keep up with the Caribbean. I think the reason why people don't often is because we just oversimplify it. The Caribbean has always been looked at with a type of creative and cultural condescension, when there are significant things happening there. There's developments there that we're not aware of. So I think when I was there for 6 months, it sort of changed the way I thought of myself as a DJ, because I was being exposed to all this new music. And then now figuring out, like, how am I going to incorporate this now? And then also just especially as a producer, trying to find my place in dancehall. You know what I mean? Because I would say that like I'm trying to make dancehall. I'm trying to, retranslate, the sounds and aesthetics that I grew up in, but also trying to reference global dance music. And bring those two worlds together. And I think that being in Jamaica sort of grounded me and helped me understand dancehall in a different way. And it was also a bit intimidating because I was like hearing things where I'm like, I can't make that. Like I don't know how to make that. And I think that intimidation is good. I think it's good to feel like when you're making anything to feel a little shook. Like you're like, damn, you know what I mean? And there's many times I would like sit in on studio sessions and stuff like that, and even listen to vocals because I also write, and I'm like, oh, my patois is garbage. You know what I mean? Like that was a big one. That was a big one when I was there, where I was like, even language, I realized how disconnected from patois I am, and like my, there's a lot of I experienced a lot of moments of like humility and a lot of moments of being not an authority, because I feel like when I'm in Toronto I'm more of like an authority, and I just think, and that's okay because I'm like, yeah, y'all should listen to me. but I'm like, it's good to switch it back and forth between those roles, and also to understand that dancehall is not static. It's evolving, it's problematic, but there's things happening in it, and I have hope. I have a lot of hope for dancehall because I think it's one of the most important genres in the world.
To be honest, babe, you are my hope for dancehall. For me, you stand as like the future of dancehall, and I don't mean in the sense of like, oh, you're going to take it over and bring it into the new age. I just mean as in like as a queer, trans,
the voice, yeah,
black, second gen Jamaican immigrant in Britain, like to be able to listen to dancehall that uplifts who I am versus like ultimately feeling a little bit guilty about singing the lyrics at the top of my
head. You're like,
you know what I'm saying?
Like, slew them. You're like, dude.
So I don't like for me, you're the first person I know of doing this. Do you know if there are any other artists or people contributing to that?
I think I know a lot of female women vocalists. Sorry, I know a lot of women vocalists, but I don't. I know some. I know this is gonna sound a little bad, but I'm gonna say you can edit it out if you want. I know some white women making dancehall, but I just don't know if that like impacts the genre politically, impacts our realm the same as a Black woman doing it. You know what I mean? Because just white women are not in the community. They're not directly like really shaking people's paradigm around music in Jamaica. Like there's been a few moments where I've been like in studio sessions and I've like had to do something production wise. I've been recording a vocal and then I've had to speak to the engineer and been like, okay, no, we need to like transpose it. We need to auto-tune it, like using some terminology, and him being like literally shocked that he first is understand, like I'll be like, oh yeah, I produced this, and he'll be like, yeah, but it's not until I like speak any time of kind of like terminology that I can tell like he's like, he literally once was like, this is the first time you're the first woman producer I've ever met. Like he said that, you know what I mean? Like that, there's a lot of those moments that happen when I'm there, when I'm working with people, where I'm like, okay, this isn't, I'm sure I'm not the only one, but this is important that I'm here doing this, you know what I mean? Especially as a Black woman, as someone like femme, especially because I'm like I feel like I'd be a bit more believable if I was like a tomboy, you know what I mean? But there's something about having technical skill and being hyper feminine, and people don't think those two things can exist at the same time. So when I come into the studio, I'm in my little heels, people are like, and I'm like, I'm cute. People don't think I know what I'm talking about at all, so I think just that is important. Those experiences are important.
And with that being said, how do you go about choosing the artists that you work with or the vocalists?
Yeah, so right now I'm working with a couple people in Jamaica. I had the opportunity to meet this one woman vocalist. Her name is Lati Kim, and she's extremely talented. And I have a couple songs that we're working on together. And that Jamaica is like slow. Like you can't just like you can't just like go there and be like, I want to meet artists, because like Jamaica people are a little suspicious. It's not the same like just making friends there and moving in the communities there. It's not the same thing. Like you need people to vouch for you. It just takes time. You know what I mean? And then also when you're not there, nobody's answering no email. So you have to be there and spend time there. So I think after spending some time there, I was there for a long time. After spending some time there, I started to meet more and more people, and not just more artists, but artists who also had an ear for like, Jamaica can be quite insular. So it's like when you're playing something that sounds like dancehall, but is also reminiscent of three other genres, people are kind of can be resistant to that, because there is this sort of like puritanical idea of like what rhythms sound like in Jamaica right now. And I'm not necessarily making that, right? So it was difficult for me to be like, I need this vocalist. I didn't hear the beat, and he'd be like, I'm gonna like them things later. You know what I mean? It's hard, but I actually, after being there for a while, I did find a little community of people, of both men and women that were like, down and like, it's interesting because there is this purism there, but there is this creativity there of people reaching into the future and trying new things. Like if you listen to dancehall from late 90s, early 2000s, like the samples that people were using were so weird. They'd use any sound. Okay. Like, you know what I mean? They're using bhangra drums.
No girl can see down pa me head. If a girl try that, she dead. She fi run the cocky red.
And weird stuff from like hip hop.
You know how? Pull up in my big fat black Cadillac.
And brought like weird vocal samples. Like that was very experimental. So it's just interesting kind of like navigating that, like who's gonna kind of like be down and who won't be down. But I did definitely find some solid people. That's why I want to go back, because you got to be there to find the artist. You can't do it online. No one's answering you. Like, you got to be there.
Well, I guess I was kind of more leaning into like in regards to their politics and what they want to
do. With their politics, when I go to Jamaica and I speak to people, there's a little bit of I try to practice a lot of compassion, compromise, and openness, because I also understand that there's a language I have, an exposure I have, and experiences I have that many people will not have there, and they most likely won't get there. So I try to meet people where they are within reason. You talk about killing people, then we can't do nothing together. But you know what I mean. But I do think that like that's it. That's an interesting question, because it's complicated. Every relationship I had with both men and women there was complex, because it's just like, obviously I have my ideas, I have my morals, I have the ways that I navigate, I have boundaries of who I'll let in and out of my space based on their values. But I'm also understanding them in a place where there's like dialogue around like gender, race, sexuality is very behind. People are not exposed. They don't get the chance to be exposed. A lot of those ideas are wrapped up in academia and privilege that a lot of people don't get. And when I was there for a long time, I started to realize how, not only how insular like the economy is and other things, but just like how that affects people's imagination and their like political, thinking and things like that. It really brought me down to earth, and just, I sort of had to rethink like, well, how am I going to connect with this person? How are we going to like meet in the middle? And also understand that it's imperfect and it's always moving. It's not static. Our relationship is in flux. Our conversations are moving constantly, and like shit, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it feels like what it is with family. You know what I mean?
Pardon?
It feels like what it is with family.
Exactly. You know what I mean? So I feel like, because I had a lot of those moments where like I would be with a friend, and then like our other Jamaican friend would like play R. Kelly. He's like, they would like play R. Kelly, or they would like, they like play R. Kelly or Chris Brown. And there is no dialogue. Like, there's so many layers. Like, first of all, people in Jamaica don't buy music. They don't perceive themselves as directly supporting an artist through monetary funds. You know what I mean? Or they're not even exposed to that conversation, or like the ideas around gendered violence are just not there. They're not there. There's so many like complexities for why they're still playing that music. Like, that dialogue, that response hasn't reached them yet. And I was like, I'm not going to sit here and be like elitist and judge you. That's not to say you let it slide. I think it's a balancing act between me wanting to critique particular mentalities and push back against it and be like, no, we need to change this. So Jamaica can step into the future along with a lot of other global communities, but also understanding this person has never heard this word or this idea or this ever, like, you know what I mean? Ever. And understanding that as well. So it's definitely like, it's a balancing act, and it's an imperfect balancing act, but politics are imperfect and politics are always changing.
So I have to ask, like, how has it been for you not being able to DJ in these times? Because as, I guess, like a club promoter myself, and like someone who used to throw nights, I was in the club every weekend without a doubt. If it wasn't my night, it was someone else's night. It was like, there were so many burgeoning queer Black and brown nights that were just, and that also that centered dancehall, that I've definitely felt the void.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even the last time I saw you DJ Babes, which is an incredible night, I just see how much like it gives you, it feeds you. And I guess you are in a position now where you're producing, so I guess you have the opportunity to make music, but how have you been doing?
Okay, so I'm going to be honest, not well. I'm not going to pretend like I've been doing well. I think there's this, like, we're in a strange place right now where like everyone is like kind of acting like this is okay. And I'm like, what are y'all on? I think this is horrible. I think it's horrible. I had a friend come over yesterday and she started to explain how Twitch worked, because I'm not on Twitch. I don't use Twitch. And she was explaining like, people subscribe and then you need like 5 people at any given time to be talking to each other so you can get to some next level, so you can get paid. And I just thought how terrible things have gotten, that, all of the art and time and effort and energy and emotion that people put into so many forms of music is now being like, it's devolved and being trivialized into either Twitch, OnlyFans, and TikTok or Instagram. I'm like, this is not a realm I ever wanted to live in. Before COVID hit, I was figuring out ways to disengage from the internet and to engage more in real life, and how to provoke people into paying attention to real life more. So it's been like, I understand how the internet connects us. Like, I'm appreciative of that, but I also don't trust it. I don't trust the internet's intersection with corporations. And I think that the internet is slowly being not slowly, the internet is being corporatized, and that, the things we see, why we see them, when we see them, the frequency of how we see them, which bodies will be more visible, et cetera, is all being controlled and pre-curated for us. So I'm not really the pivot of like art in real life to art on the internet is not going to be a democratic one. It's going to be unfair, and many, many communities and people will be erased. So I'm not into this. I'm not into this. I don't think any government in the world has asked the question, has attempted to design something that addresses the fact that people will not be able to connect. They've addressed commerce. They were like, well, COVID's happening. Well, this is how you can buy this thing you still want. And this is how you can stay home. But there has been no acknowledgement or dialogue around, well, how do people feel? And how will communities connect? And how will vulnerable communities connect? Communities that rely on each other connect? Like, COVID has really heightened individualistic capitalism, and I think we're about to really stay there. I think that's That's the way that's in the intention. I know it sounds a little crazy right now, but I 100% believe that. A lot of venues have closed in Toronto, a lot of queer venues, and I don't think anyone's asking where if they're coming back. There's not going to be some special government loan to bring back the queer venues. You know what I mean? They're not having a meeting about that. You know what I mean? And we know that, you know, nightlife is a big, the primary way that queer communities organize and affirm each other and see each other. So there's just so many things about it. You know, I hate using the word nightlife, club, blah, 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 because it really trivializes what it actually is. You know what I mean? What it actually is a space of connection and affirmation. And it's a space that has nothing to do with money. When I think about, you know, dance hall and how that fits into rave culture, I say it very often. I love dancehall, even though it's problematic. But I love dancehall because I feel like dancehall was something that was made for people. They were speaking to each other, for people, by people. There was no societal gaze. There is no like, we're making this to speak to the rest of the world, or we're answering a question. People were speaking directly to the people in their own communities. They were making music about their lives and speaking to each other. And there is no outside, like no external gaze was considered. You know what I mean? And in that way, there's like such a sincerity and a rebellion that's in that. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like in the world, everyone is so focused on like, I'm making music for this American institution, like to be acknowledged by. Dancehall was not trying to be acknowledged by any. I think now obviously it's moved to a different place, but the inception of dancehall was not to be acknowledged by any outside institution. That came later. Is there literally people like building a vibe for their community? It's like, we're gonna work all week and then we're gonna make this sound system so everybody can come and gather here. And I feel like what's like, people separate the things, but I'm like, that's rave culture. Like, you know what I mean? Like I started to realize, I'm like, oh damn, like this is like in my blood actually. Like the reason like I'm so obsessed with this is because it's actually like my heritage. You know what I mean? Like that is rave culture. So I get that question a lot. They're like, well, how does dancehall connect to rave culture? I'm like, it is rave culture, like at its essence. Sound system culture is rave culture. You know what I mean? Like, I think that connection, that sharing of music, that taking up public space, you know what I mean? And having it nothing to do with money, you know, like the sound systems were free. People were just gathering in the street, you know, and it was a real threat to like, because let's be honest, like, there is no such thing as public space. I don't think so. There's public space is so good. Like when I look at Toronto, the way they control the parks and all the bylaws, and how you can't even put a little table on the street without the police coming up. You think you can play dominoes on the sidewalk here? They're pulling up right away and telling you you're loitering. Like there's actually in a lot of these first world cities, there is no public space. There's controlled spaces where you're allowed to do particular things, but once you leave your apartment, you don't own any of this. None of this belongs to our communities, you know. And that's why sound system culture is important, rave culture is important, because it's taking that back. It's taking that back and saying that this has nothing to do with commerce, but it's still important. It's very, very important. So I don't know why I'm upset right now, but like, that's that. Yeah. Pardon me?
There's a lot to be upset about that you mentioned. Like,
there is.
We trivialize a lot, and we're always just like, we're in the club, whoop-de-whoop, but like at the end of the day, we know why we're doing what we're doing.
Exactly.
Did you see that Skillabang was on the cover of ID? Well, they did like a Jamaican version of ID.
Yeah, I thought it was very cool. Tommy Lee looks scary. Yo, yeah. Tommy Lee looks like he killed 5 people before the shoot. That is scary. It's like, you see the Tommy Lee one?
I haven't seen it. No.
He has bodies. Like, yeah, he looked like he didn't know what to do. It's giving murder.
Thank you so much for today. Appreciate the bars. Like, even my mind has been blown. Or like, you've given words to so many thoughts I've had around the work that we do and the loss of it, most importantly, and how like dancehall intersects with our culture and what we're trying to do here in our respective countries. Yeah, so thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Right now, we have a mix from Young Bambii. You want to introduce?
Yeah. So the mix. I hate this part. I'm like saying like 8 different genre names. I'm like, it's kind of like sub this, but a little bit like, but the mix is basically, I love the UK music scene. That's a big influence. So you're going to hear a lot of UK sounds, garage. You're going to hear some, nostalgic dancehall, but also some stuff that I heard in Jamaica that is very important right now because Jamaica's on a wave. So it's just, a little bit of things that I guess are very my signature, you could say, but also things that I've picked up along the way. Hot, exactly.
Me glad me back up on this hardcore soldier. No fi what me ball out for murder. No fi position and set me in a harder. He get the gift from the Almighty Father. Me glad me back up on this hardcore soldier. No fi what me ball out for murder. No fi position and set me in a harder. He get the gift from the Almighty Father. Good fucking got it up, not tell a lie, me just love how it slap it up. Sink the jam deep and don't stop, send it up. Ram it and jam it and don't stop, wind it up. This a fuck up it up at the edges, start grab it up. Pussy start siren, want it up. Wife full of spite, cause him not stop, tease it up. Grab the body jaws and don't stop, beat it up. Me glad me back up on this hardcore soldier. Don't for what me ball out for murder. Don't for position and set me in a harder. You get the gift from the Almighty Father. Me glad me back up on this hardcore soldier. Don't for what me ball out for murder. Don't for position and set me in a harder. He get the gift from the Almighty Father.
What we telling them?
It's killer town season, yeah. It's killer town season, oh. It's killer town season, yeah. With a killer town for no reason. It's killer town season, yeah. It's killer town season, yo. It's killer town season, yeah. With a killer town for no reason.
With a killer sound for no reason. With a killer sound for no reason. With a killer sound for no reason. Right about now, it's killer sound season. With a killer sound for no reason. With a killer sound for no reason. With a killer sound for no reason. Right about now, it's killer sound season.
With a killer sound for no reason. Any day, any weather, any season. Them say they want charge man for treason. And we don't dance from morning till evening. No flicker hand, enough gas screaming. Swing thing, we bring the whole team in. Enough of them want talk about we. And we see the bomb back like haters scheming. Them not bad like this. We kill dance and get mad like this. When me come a dance, me da kill any sound. Cause none of them a stay on them job like this. Kill them fast, me da kill them quick. Bury in a dance sound, bury in a ditch. Right now my sound I go slip on a sound I go dead when done.
You're now listening to Bambii for Foresight.
Top rungs.
You say, is it? Top ranking, a bad man thing, yeah. Top ranking, yeah man, a bad man thing, yeah. Top ranking, a bad man thing, yeah. Top ranking, yeah man, a bad man thing, yeah. What make your black flick? I pump rifle a one crank thing. Like pregnant girl, my pint and spit. Hear people a ball, what you cry says. Mach 90, yeah. AK shot pinted. And a knife when shot a slice and peel. Yeah, I lock down like Chinese. Pan clip, pan chopstick. You will vanish, or go pan fridge. To the airport, they say your marrow go. Me no fear po. Me will bomb your house, I'm a Bin Laden. And a chatting, mulla with the mini key. Turn them in a garbage. And me say chigga play. And a ramping, shook them in a grave. Me no put them in a bandage. He said, top ranking. A bad man thing, yeah. Top ranking, yeah man, a bad man thing, yeah. Top ranking, a bad man thing, yeah. Top ranking, yeah man, a bad man thing, yeah.
Say to me party, me have to move anytime the money call me. Move, top down yellow Maserati. Cop a few of them before me 40. Oh, she gon' make another one drop. Anytime we chat is another contract. Sign, Benz pon the wharf and the beam are just clear. My friend them a short is about that one that. Yeah, spliffing I'm out tonight. Both we have gone in the house, you're right. Money nothing on me account tonight. So shh, don't you right. Oh. Bamba my shake in a shot. Champagne glass for the boss. The outfit a nasty in a ass. Me get the pussy and me not even ask. Bamba my shake in a shot. Champagne glass for the boss. The outfit a nasty in a ass. Gyal give it to me and me not even ask. Pull up in a fresh Adidas. None of my ride them never need gas. Never. Time for top with a peacock. So a madness whenever we frost. We fly so much that we a get jet lag. Now some boy girl want take set by. Hits after hits where you expect. Pay me the cash, bad man we no take check.
And the girl in sugar. Oh Lord. The girl in. Yeah. Hey, When God a give you pretty, you go rejoin the line. You want cancer at your must see born 2 times. Me a watch your video and me so keep on rewind. Cause the way how you a wine, your old fee blow mine. Let me tell you this, I find me no blind. This girl a tall like a superman. What again? Shape like a Coca-Cola bottle. This girl a pretty like a rose petal. Love how you a bubble. Me's a boy no mind the double trouble. From your tall like a superman. What again? Shape like a Coca-Cola bottle. Girl you pretty like a rose petal. Love how you a bubble. Me's a boy no mind the double trouble. I swear no have nothing on you. What that she dey do? I go like she a hot as when she know she a go low. Flight, tell her you have your own flight crew and your own car service pick you up on Malibu. Inna your man life you are the super glue. While your man work them off like a 1 week flu. Not you, please tell a girl fi try do. A girl don't know about you, so you tall like a supermodel. Shape like a Coca-Cola bottle. This girl a pretty like a rose petal. Love how you a bubble. Me's a boy no mind the double trouble. From you tall like a supermodel. Shape like a Coca-Cola bottle. This girl a pretty like a rose petal. Love how you a bubble. Me's a boy no mind the double trouble. Hey, tell her waist girl you not in a no argument. How long she dey hurt on no bank statement. Girl show me the key to your new apartment. It's a matter if a market or you a parent. You only know you don't need to know parents. That's your
friendly, sexy. Shawty take friendly, sexy. Shawty don't text me. Okay, shawty take friendly. Wicked, sexy. Wicked, sexy. Wicked, sexy. Yo, wicked, sexy. Yo, I put models in the coupe, type of shit. You see them titties at the roof, type of shit. We kick back by the pool. Shawty take it out, tryna play it smooth. Shawty I'm wicked, like Vicky. Shawty I'm sexy, kinda like Britney. Shawty don't text me, even when you miss me. Groupies at my line now, they wanna get freaky quickly. Molly, we could try this. Fucking on my mouth on the sidekick. You can sleep with the pirates. Baby, you can buy this wicked. Sexy, shawty I'm wicked. Sexy, shawty I'm wicked. Don't stress me, shawty I'm wicked. Sexy.
I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go. I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. You got to let it go.
Look how you take up my energy. Love your body, turning on me enemy. You never do no wrong, on your specialty. Now you say I want go a therapy. You got me 3:30 in the morning. I want to run when balling. Love not only come from talking. The light can only shine from the dark end. I can see you getting on. You come rub up. Before you did stuck up. Make sure you know who you want, love up. My insurance got messed up. From my ex in Texas. I told you to drop it. I feel listen on me and you no addition.
I told you once, baby. I told you once what I know. 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 I told you once. I told you once. I told you once.
Wavy shit.
I told you once. I told you once. I told you once.
Yes. Press back. In fact, I'ma talk facts. Racks. In fact, I'ma cop plaques. Stack. In fact, I'ma cop rolls. Jags. In fact, I'ma cop bail. What's that? Jump in the back. Let me hit that. Let me take it to the max.
Yeah.
Take it to the max.
Yeah.
Hey.
I'ma take it to the max. Love it when I give her from the back. She hates it when I leave her for long. She loves it when I stay in contact. When she wind up, yeah. She did make my one hold on. Yeah. You're always on my mind, baby, in fact. Love every night, baby, in fact. Cop you that jack, baby, in fact. Cop you that Benz, baby, in fact. When you wind up, my girl, come closer. Baby, gonna me and you go deep strong. Yeah.
Yes. Press back. In fact, I'ma talk facts. Racks. In fact, I'ma cop plaques. Stack. In fact, I'ma cop rolls. Jags. In fact, I'ma cop bail. What's that? Jump in the back. Let me hit that. Let me take it to the max. Take it to the max.
I
Actually kinda feeling I'm your London top boy. You're a little old, I guess I'll be your toy one. Take you to my Africa and back somewhere more. Keep you under arm like you be my roll on. You don't ever smoke, it's cool, I'll roll one. Now expose the thing in your tongue. Expose the skill in your tongue. Hold your breath in your lung. Make your waist accept it and decline. Baby, come and show me how you wind it up. Show the missing talents that's inside. Me star boy and yes, not time to shine. Rest back, in fact, I'ma talk facts. Racks, in fact, I'ma cop plaques. Stack, in fact, I'ma cop rolls. Jags, in fact, I'ma cop babe. What's that? Jump in the back, let me hit that. Let me take it to the max. Take it to the max.
Hype and thing, yo, whatever you call it. Me and everyone my part with. Link me, I'ma tell you one stories. You link me, then you're there with a star. Hype and thing, yo, whatever you call it. Me and everyone my part with. Link me, I'ma tell you one stories. You link me, then you're there with a star.